I am the Errol Chair in Food Policy and Society. I joined the University of Guelph as the chair and as an associate professor in the Department of Geography, Environment and Geomatics last September. I focus on equity and justice in Canada's increasingly diverse society with respect to food access and the role of innovative community and entrepreneurial responses in strengthening sustainable and equitable food systems. We're going to begin by turning things on their head a little bit, and we're going to kick things off with some short discussion at your tables with your neighbors and your peers. This exercise, we're just going to take about 10 minutes, at which point I'll then invite our panelists for the next session up to the front to introduce them and to talk more about how their work relates to the topic at hand today. As a group, we're just asking you to think of a time where you or someone you know or a community that you know of experienced a crisis. I'm sure many of us could come up with a few different examples. But what we're really looking for you to do is to brainstorm what factors or what resources supported or helped you during that time of adversity. Don't overthink it. It's really just meant to be a group kind of brainstorm. As you'll notice, some worksheets have been placed at each of the table where you can record some of your thoughts that are raised. Afterwards, we will collect that and compile that into a summary document and post that on the Arrow Food Institute's website. Okay, so we've got a countdown clock at the front here to give you an idea of how much time you have left. But please take this moment to converse with your neighbors and think about what resources help you or are helpful in overcoming crisis and in supporting resiliency. Thank you. Okay, I think we can reconvene. Thanks so much for taking some time to discuss amongst yourselves. Hopefully it gave you all a bit of an opportunity to get to know your neighbors if you don't already. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of our panelists here today, some of whom have traveled quite some distance to be here. We're very grateful for you sharing your time and insights with us. First, I'd like to introduce Christine Smith-Martin, who is a member of the Haida and Tsimshian Nations and works as Chief Executive Officer for the Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative. Welcome. Thank you. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Erin Filey-Renecki, who is Chief Development and Partnerships Officer with Food Banks Canada, where she leads fundraising and also food-raising efforts to support food bank partners across the country. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amos Lar, Professor of Public Health Nutrition from the University of Ghana, where his research explores how food environments and structural inequities shape diet-related diseases and opportunities for health. Welcome to you all. I'd like to start with each of you just sharing a little bit more about some of the work that you're involved in catalyzing food systems change. And perhaps if you could comment on one key takeaway from the table that you were sitting at and how this might relate to some of your work. Amos, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm the university professor of public health nutrition, and my work examines food environment and the structural forces that shape them and how that drives diet-related morbidities. And so as a teacher, researcher, what we do is generate evidence, sometimes use that evidence in scholar activism, but also influencing policy with the hope that those interventions can make our food environment disease-preventing and then help promoting. But for today's conversation, I had an opportunity to contribute to two initiatives that I hope I can bring to this Canadian conversation, those insights from Africa. One had to do with supporting the African Union to develop their 10-year food system strategy and a political commitment. It's called CARDIP, and then the Kampala Declaration. And then the second one had to do with an opportunity that I had to work with Professor Ivan Fraser to support the global panel, to support 3 countries in Africa to, as they work on transforming their food system, do so with resilience in mind. And so, yeah, that's what I want to bring to the conversation today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. On to you, Erin. Yes.
Yeah, so I, as she said, I lead the fundraising and food raising team at Food Banks Canada. And for context, Food Banks Canada is the national organization that works to support the more than 5,500 community food organizations that provide critical food assistance to millions, unfortunately, of Canadians every year. Evan said off the top, 25% of us are food insecure. We continue to see record numbers of people visiting food banks every year. And with that, we know that 30% of food banks last year actually could not serve the entire need in their community. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and when we talk about sort of resiliency and capacity, it's really about making sure that the food bank system, which is actually a critical part of the food system in Canada, is equipped to be able to deliver to those millions of people who rely on us every day, or not every day, sorry. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but rely on us every year. So that's really where the Food Banks Canada work is rooted, is making sure not only is there enough food, but that the capacity to actually take that food and deliver that food to community, that they have that capacity, because both of those things have to happen.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to you, Christine. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christine Smith-Martin. I'm the CEO of an organization called Coastal First Nations, and we are, our communities are represented in 9 different communities along the beautiful British Columbia coast, and we've been in existence for sort of 20 plus years. But our communities have worked in an alliance long before we came along. We have a traditional alliance where we work together along the coast. And you may have heard of some of the remarkable agreements that we've been able to achieve, not just with ourselves, but with provincial, federal, and philanthropic partners. The first one is the Great Bear Rainforest Agreement, an agreement that was really critical at that time 20 years ago, when we were extracting at an astronomical rate in our traditional territories, and we've managed to save over 85% of that forest. The other one is what we call a fish reconciliation agreement. We've just did that probably about 2 years ago, 2 years plus, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And the latest one is the Great Bear Sea, which is about marine protected areas within our coast. So I plan to talk a bit about, and how do those agreements connect to food sovereignty for our coastal communities, and be able to talk a little bit about that. And on our table, we talked a lot about communications and government, and how, and at the end of the day, it lies within community and ensuring that we have a community plan.
Wonderful. And a good example of taking those relationships at the community level and building power through regional networks and cooperation. So we heard very powerfully this morning that the concept of resilience is historically focused a lot on the ability to recover from disruption, and the onus is often placed on individuals to be resilient, many of whom are already disproportionately experiencing the risks and hazards of social and environmental inequalities. And a more critical approach to resiliency is not just merely reacting and returning to a status quo state, but that transformative power into an alternative future that is more just, more prosperous for more people. So recognizing that some people have been sidelined from previous conversations or discussions or responses to today's agri-food challenges, perhaps each of you could comment on an example of a successful partnership or initiative that you've been involved in that has taken up perhaps that more inclusive or transformative approach to building capacity for resiliency. Perhaps we'll go the other way this time round, not to put you back on the spot, but.
Sure. I think all 3 of those agreements that I mentioned, the first one, the Great Bear Rainforest Agreement, it really allowed us to have our provincial British Columbian government at the table. It also allowed the federal government of Canada to be at the table, and our philanthropic partners Nature United, who's here today, and some of our other philanthropic partners to really come together and form a really unique agreement. And I think it was interesting because we all come together with the same intention. And I realize how unique it is in British Columbia and having our provincial government come to the table. And what we managed to do, and not only that, there's also environmental groups that came, and also, believe it or not, some of the forestry companies that came and sat down as part of these sort of negotiations and discussions about this agreement so that they can hear their side. And at the end of the day, for us, it was always about protection. And we knew that we had to live in balance. And so part of this protection of this, it is one of the last remaining coastal temperate rainforests left in the world. And we knew the significance of it, and we knew that we had to bring partners together to protect it. Thank gosh we did, because at this day and age, 20 years later, it was slated for 85% of it to be deforested in our territory. And now we look at it as an abundance. It's the great cedars that are in our territory. And I'll just add maybe a little bit more context to that first one. It is also, we can't continue to ask Indigenous communities that we want you to save this at the cost of jobs in your community. Has always been the sort of agreements that have come before this one. What we said was, this is important to us, and building sustainable wealth in our community is also important to us. So as part of the agreement, we have things like the carbon credits, that is part of the Great Bear Carbon Credit Corporation, but we've also had an economic envelope as part of that agreement, and that economic envelope was about $60 million. And we have just done research at Coast Funds, who house our dollars. The ripple effect of that $60 million is about $1.3 billion that have come into our coastal communities. And it's recognized around the world. There's, the financial model that we developed, what they call the first PFP, Project Finance for Permanency, is one that's is duplicated in 9 different countries now. So I think there is such an amazing story behind that. And also the other agreements are somewhat the same in terms of our partnership, but it is really important to recognize that Indigenous communities are the ones that are out on the waters and on the forests. They understand we have guardians out on our ocean. We understand what's happening on our ocean in a daily recording of the things that they're finding out there. So I think when you talk about partnerships, that's really important to have, and nurturing those partnerships too. And sometimes they're not easy discussions to talk with government about changing their policies or the way that they think about these pieces, because in our area, we all know that the way that they've handled fishing and openings, closings, and all of those haven't been great. It's because our people haven't been involved. So co-governance is a very important piece of this work.
Okay, wonderful. I do have some follow-ups, but I think we'll be able to cover it off in the next round. So on to you, Erin. Yeah.
So this morning we heard Davida speak a lot about community and the importance of rooting, and food banks across this country, and I know there's some of you in the room, are built on the strength of their community. The challenges that we face is that the amazing job that each of those food banks does within its own community, the challenge is that community can get served, but there's missed opportunity beyond it. And if that community, in a case where you've got a rural food bank and there's a farmer down the road and the farmer's got excess supply, how does that food get into the system? Because that local food bank can't necessarily take it. So what Food Banks Canada is really looking to do is to find ways to take the strengths of the food banks network and interconnect them and make sure that the food bank, North York Harvest is sitting right there, who has an amazing purchasing program. How do we take those programs and replicate them or duplicate them or learn from them and connect these organizations, these amazing community organizations together? And efficiency isn't always a bad word. How do we find efficiency? How do we make sure that we can scale some of the work that's happening so well in local communities, but without disrupting what makes those food banks and those communities special. And it allows, food banks work really hard, and they're often just trying to get that last, that piece of food on the shelf and out the door to their client, that they can't necessarily come up and see the opportunities outside of their own community or how to connect. And that's the role that Food Banks Canada is playing. We are working really closely with Greener Village, a food bank in Fredericton. They are actually, they've just broken ground. They have they are building a facility in which that they can take produce from New Brunswick farmers and actually turn it into what we call food bank ready food. So one of the big challenges that the food bank system faces is that as I said, 30% of food banks ran out of food. There's no shortage of food in this country. You're all food people. We know there's lots of food. But for food banks, it's often in the wrong format and in the wrong place. And so what this facility will do is allow that produce to be able to be transformed into formats that will better serve the food bank system, not just in Fredericton, not just in New Brunswick, but throughout the Maritimes, so that we can drive some of that scale, some of that efficiency, and make sure that there is, those carrots that farmer desperately wants to pull out of the field or not till under can get to somebody who needs it, whether it's in Charlottetown or Truro or right in their own local community. So that's really where we're looking to build on the strengths of those local communities, the expertise of those local communities. Nobody knows a community better than their local food bank. And our intent is to not push down, but to elevate up and to stitch together.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Amos, on to you.
Yeah, sure. And so in my case, the example that I would give is that of a partnership of African governments, sometimes used to be referred to as NEPAD, New Partnership for Africa's Development. I think the governments of Africa then in 2003 did recognize that, which I recognized this morning when I participated in the group conversation, that there's a convergence of the challenges that we are dealing with. And in our group, we had a Ghanaian, we had someone originally from Iran, we had a Canadian. And then the conversation that we had strikingly showed a convergence of challenges that Ghanaians are having, similar challenges in Canada, and similar challenges in Iran. And so in 2003, the African government did recognize that challenges that Ghanaians were facing were similar to challenges that Mozambicans were facing. And so they came out to address their problems together. And what they did then was to form what they call CAADP, Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program. So in Maputo in 2003, they pooled resources, including epistemic resources, together to address this problem. 10 years following that, in 2014, they recommitted their commitment to address the problem that they sought to address in 2003. And so the main goal then was that food insecurity is a big issue in Africa, and therefore they needed to address it. How were they addressing it? Through this partnership, increasing agricultural production and productivity, produce food to feed. Then in 2020, after 10 years following that, in 2024, they realized that the problem that they aimed to address was not just going to be addressed through production and then productivity. They needed to find other ways of getting it addressed. And so other than just producing to feed, there was a recognition that there's the need to produce to nourish. And so that led to a revision or amendment of this strategy. And so to get these addressed sustainably, other than just government technocrats meeting and then developing this document, they came out with a strategy to get key food system stakeholders involved, academics, civil society organizations, but of course, government technocrats as well. And so that's when some of us got an opportunity to contribute to the development of this strategy. Currently, the strategy recognizes that Africa can't solve this problem through just producing food and through agricultural productivity. They need to do that within, with sustainable, approaches. And so those sustainable approaches, for example, ensuring that they are producing within planetary boundaries, but also ensuring that the systems that they are trying to transform to address Africa's food needs are resilient. And so the current CARDIP strategy, which comes with a set of political commitment, actually put resilience front and center. And so it argues that for Africa to address these problems, resilience needs to be given the attention that it deserves. Yes, and so that's just one example. The other example had to do with, a global panel recognizing that African governments are interested in transforming their food systems, and so came out with a partnership where academics again and the government partners came together to find a way of, transforming these food systems. And then they noted that for these food systems to be transformed, the process or governance system also needs to be transformed. And so I think today those are the two things that I would like to contribute to, those two partnerships.
Okay, thank you. So you're all operating in different contexts, but I think what it's reinforcing is that whether it's the community scale, the regional, intergovernmental relations, or at a global level, responding to today's contemporary food system challenges requires bringing together people who haven't always been sitting at the same table together. I'm mindful of time, so perhaps for this question, one of you could respond, and I'd like to ensure you all have a chance for our final question. But power imbalances, inequities in resource distribution, and eroded trust have historically made it difficult for different stakeholders and interests to come together, to collaborate, and build more resilient food systems. What have been some of your experiences, or what type of approach have you adopted to rebuild trust and dialogue between partners with different interests to establish common goals and to try and build capacity forward together? I'm kind of looking at you, Christine, because I think it's pretty relevant to your context.
I thought she said it was open.
Yeah.
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think us sort of establishing ourselves, and when we talk about the world, we talk about economics and looking at the great models that we have had in our coast, and the work that we've done has proven that it is a success. And we've been able to manage to leverage our dollars. We've managed to be able to create over 1,400 new jobs within our coastal communities. It's a high unemployment population, so we're very proud of that. We've also created about 140 new businesses that are more in line with the values of our communities, and that was really important because in British Columbia, it's so beautiful there that people don't come to British Columbia just to come to Vancouver. If you really want to see British Columbia, you go to Haida Gwaii, you go to Heilstruk territory, you go to the North Coast and Hartley Bay and all of those areas are really important. And for us, when we talk about economics, I'll give you an example. Haida House in Haida Gwaii, which was part of this first agreement that we had, the economic part, they have built log cabins. If you have ever been to Haida Gwaii, or you haven't been, put it on your bucket list because it is absolutely stunning. But they've built 7 log homes that are very much duplicated of our longhouses. And in there, it's a beautiful place right along the beach. And I'm Haida myself, and I can't even get a room there because there's a 2.5-year wait list to get a place there. And they decided, and they knew that it was really going to be economically viable to have this because they see it in their community. They know tourism is and they know that people want to get to know Haida people. So they're very much enjoying the fruits of that labor. In Prince Rupert, one of our communities, took some of these dollars and invested into the Crest Hotel, which is a big hotel in Prince Rupert. It's a beautiful hotel. Those are sort of some of those economic drivers. But I think more importantly for us, food sovereignty means that we are protecting our main source of food, which is from the ocean and then from our terrestrial. So a lot of the work that I do, for example, right now, I'm battling to keep any oil bitumen off of our coast because it is not a part of any of our plans. And we are not willing to take that. It'll be a devastating impact on our community. So for us, it's about protecting that food. That's 80% of our food comes from the ocean. And so when we talk about food sovereignty, for us, it's just not sort of clear. It's not directed to the purchasing of something. It's directed to the protection of the sort of breadbasket of our communities, which is the ocean and the moose that are coming up. I'm going moose hunting once I get back to our territory. Like, these are things that we purposely live off of. Our potlatches, our feasts, those are the main staples. You see the salmon that's on here and the dogfish that are on my jewelry. We are connected to these in a way that nobody else can really understand. Our job and our responsibility is to protect this for the next generation. We're not just thinking about now. I'm thinking about my grandchildren's grandchildren when we're doing this work.
Okay, thank you very much. We've only got time for about 2 minutes each for you to respond, but I did want to pose this question about leadership. What type of leadership is required to guide us towards this more transformative, relational, inclusive approach to resiliency? So within the context of your own work, what would you say is the biggest opportunity for today's most influential food system thought leaders to commit to this more transformative resiliency and capacity building? Would you like to start? Erin?
Yeah. So I think in terms of leadership, I think and in terms of the food bank sector, what we're facing and what we need is a bit of a mind shift. So everyone in this room can agree, and everyone in the food banking sector can agree, that we don't actually believe food banks should exist. Nobody wants to have food banks. We want people to be able to go to the grocery store on a regular basis and be able to afford the food that they need to feed their families. However, we're in a scenario where that's just not reality. The first food banks came to be 40 plus years ago, and most of them had sunset clauses. And there is still a bit of a mindset that we're temporary and we apologize for existing. And the fact of the matter is, we need to move away from that. We shouldn't be apologizing for existing. We are here, we are serving millions of people every year, and we're a critical part of the food systems in this country. And until the government takes all of our recommendations, which we put out every year, and puts them into place, it's unlikely that the food bank system is going to go anywhere. So what we really need to do is to be able to look forward and to be able to connect the dots between all parts of the food system. So that is the agricultural producers. How do we break down the economic barriers and logistic barriers so that food that's going to waste on farm can make it to community? How do we work with the CPG companies to make sure that they continue to ensure that nothing that they make goes to waste? How do we work together so that we have the capacity to actually absorb this food? If all the food that we needed was actually available to the food banks, they wouldn't have the capacity to actually move it. So there's infrastructure needed. But what we need to do is actually break down some barriers and some mindsets, and to sort of take hold of the scenario that we do good work, we're important work, and we are part of the system until we're not.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. On leadership, the group that we work with, trying to translate that continental, framework and strategies to address local problems in Ghana, work with this idea that, everyone is a leader, and so we can lead from where we stand. And so to do that, what we had to do was to come out with, coalitions, indeed, a coalition of coalitions. And there you had academics working with civil society, to ensure that the advocacy that the civil society do is evidence-informed. And the evidence is then generated by academics, as academics support them through scholar activism. And through this, we have been able in Ghana to convince the Ghanaian government to develop a number of food-based policies that we believe can make the Ghanaian food environment, as I noted earlier, disease preventing and health promoting. And so civil society, working with academics, and the two working with government have been able to do this. And so for these to be addressed, I don't think we have to look up to maybe a national president or a minister, but all key stakeholders in the Ghanaian food system, and therefore the African food system and the global food system can contribute to addressing the problem as leaders. And so leading from where we stand. So currently, this work that I'm referring to have been able to develop a nutrient profiling system, a tool that would help the Ghanaian government to be able to tell which kinds of food are healthy or not healthy, and then on the basis of that, 4 food-based policies: front of pack labeling policy, marketing restrictions policy, public food procurement, and service policies have been drafted. And so once they are implemented, we hope that it can contribute to improving the Ghanaian food environment. And so sometimes when we talk about leadership, we think maybe the government should lead, but if you want the government to lead, you could wait till eternity. Sometimes we have to take the bull by the horns and lead. Okay.
And sometimes it's about certain leaders giving room and space for other leaders to come into that conversation.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you. Christine.
I guess I would leave with all the success that we've been able to achieve is we got out of our silos and we sat down with our partners and discovered that we have some areas that overlap with each other. And anytime we had a challenge come up, that's including the Great Bear Rainforest, and this recent one was the Great Bear Sea PFP, we had bumps that came upon us, and we made a commitment that we would come back together and work out those bumps. We wouldn't go to our silos and not talk to each other because we don't agree on something. Our commitment was, we'll come back together. How can we support each other? Because all of us want to get here. So I think that's what we're all going to need to do in this new sort of era that we're in. And I think, I guess the last piece that I'll share with you, a lot of the times you'll see First Nations, you'll think, when you see them on TV, when they're protesting, it really isn't protesting. It is protecting our food sovereignty in our territories. It is always connected back to, we need to protect this for the future generations, and not just us. Like, we're doing this work in British Columbia. It's going to benefit commercial fishermen. It's going to benefit sports fishermen. And benefit anybody who gets to enjoy sushi in Vancouver, for example. Or they want to go and they want to order Haida halibut. Well, you can't do that unless you're investing in what's in the waters and protecting that.
Thank you. And so I think, as you raise, in this day of increasing and rampant polarization, a lot of what we need from our leaders today is the ability to actually just stay at the table and to learn to be uncomfortable and to learn to talk with others that we may not necessarily always agree with, and to work towards that common ground. Obviously, we are just scraping the surface on this issue. We could go on, and we hope that this conversation will continue throughout the day, from breaks to lunches to casual table discussions. We hope that we can carry this conversation forward and continue to transform or bounce forward towards a more inclusive and collective approach to understanding and fostering resiliency. And that means asking, how can we think about all of our own roles, capacities, and perspectives differently? Who are we not perhaps in conversation with that we should be to push the needle and to catalyze change? And how can we use the rest of this day to try and continue to break down barriers? So sincere thanks once again to all of you, Christine, Aaron, Amos, for your time and insights today.